Welcome everyone. I'll just talk for a second about the content of this session. And so the live sense making sessions on Monday have kind of emerged as a space to discuss whatever is really alive. So we had one about conspiracy, then we had the one last week about masculine and feminine, which kind of came from discussions in the community. And this one really has come out of a lot of discussions that we've been having behind the scenes about, what are the values of the community that are emerging? What are the codes of conduct? And realizing that we actually do need to start making those explicit. And we really, the nature of the community is something that we really want that to be a crowdsourced process as much as possible. And so that's the function of this call, is really to just get a sense of what are the values of a community like this. I feel like we can take inspiration from other similar communities, and I'd love to hand over to Brooks in a second to talk about the Burning Man community and some learnings that he may have. But yeah, what we're going to do in a minute is to go out. We're going to go quite early into breakout groups, because I think it would be great to give everyone a chance just to articulate their feelings around, like, what kind of community, what kind of values do we want to encourage and do we want to have as part of the community. And because I think we have to have the balance of challenge and challenge and inclusion, and also what are the kind of behaviors that we need to ask for accountability around? What are the behaviors or what are the values that are what are the values that are non-negotiable? And what are the values that we aspire to? And those, I think, will be maybe different for different people, but I'm hoping that we can come to a set of sort of core principles that we can kind of encode or put into a text by if not by the end of this call, then certainly over the next week or two. Brooks, I'm going to hand over to you first as the community manager. Is there anything that you wanted to say just to frame the call?
Hi. Let's see. Yeah, I just I think that it's been a really cool process so far that Ali and David came in and have basically founded this thing. And that the function of a call like this is actually to start to decentralize a little bit of that very centralized power, and that ultimately, it's on the basis of calls like this and the advice that we get that you actually get to define this this community and what it stands for, and like how it is that we want to be together. Yeah, was there something else that you'd like me to mention?
I wonder whether, Ali, did you want to say something first, and then maybe we'll ask Brooks about any learnings from Burning Man and from.
Yeah, I thought I'd love to hear Brooks talk about that, because we talked about it briefly before. One thing I would just add is something that's come up for me as we've been having this discussion is it's something that happened when we were doing the Rebel Wisdom Summit, so which was our kind of first kind of major live event. And we really wanted to have a space for people like here to have difficult conversations, or conversations that we can't have on other forums, that we can't necessarily have with our friends sometimes. We certainly can't have on Facebook unless you want to spend hours arguing with someone. We want to have that nuanced, open, curious conversation. When we were doing the summit, as we were developing it, we eventually got to the place where we were like, well, we needed to be safe. We needed to be a kind of safe space. And then we were like, oh shit, we're making another safe space. But there is something that comes up in me for that. There's something around the balance of challenge and safety as a as a kind of polarity that I feel very strongly when we talk about this, and one that comes up for me is really important, because it's not either or, it's very much a dance between the two. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that yeah, the more we've talked about this and talked with Brooks around it and just really explored it, the more I see this as a dynamic process. It's not like we set in a set of community values and those are written in stone tablets and they're kind of up somewhere. There is a kind of balance somewhere to be struck between having very clear boundaries and very clear intention, and also allowing this flexibility and movement. So yeah, those are two things that just come up for me. And yeah, Brooks, I wanted to hand back to you and just maybe hear a little bit about your experiences with this kind of question in terms of the Burning Man communities. And I think you mentioned before, which was interesting, the difference between temporary and the more long-term communities, which I think is worth bringing up.
Yeah. So just to fill you guys in, like part of the experience that I've had with community building has been through building up the borderland community, which is like the Scandinavian regional version of Burning Man in up here in Northern Europe. And since 2016, I've been heavily engaged in making it a distributed governance model, running on in part on principles that were laid out by Frederick Laloux in Reinventing Organizations, and how insanely difficult it turned out to be to actually do something like that. And then, you know, the basis of it is still the 10 principles of Burning Man, and one of the primary principles and the most difficult one is the principle of radical inclusion, which is about like, what is it that it's like, do you need any prerequisites in order to participate in the community, and to what extent can we include people who aren't necessarily like you know, the cliques and the cultures that the people in the middle are from. And Burning Man and Borderland do that really, really well. But the thing about it is that the Burning Man and Borderland are events, and they play out over the course of a few weeks, and then everybody goes back to their default lives, as we call it. And the issue is that if you want to have something that is more sustained and long term as a community, then things like harmony start playing a big role. Meaning that you have to generally, like, even in communities where there is a lot of space for people to disagree, you still have to have more agreement than disagreement, or sort of the chaos of it will just rise to levels where it doesn't feel safe safe enough to participate. And so that's kind of where the like radical inclusion has to kind of be redefined, in that for example, if I radically include someone who causes a lot of chaos, and that the conversation keeps going back to that, and we have to keep processing that, then eventually just having that conversation will drown out 100 other conversations. And so we've in the Borderland community in particular, we've been around that a few times, and have found that radical just means as much as you can. We want to include as many diverse voices as we can, but that sometimes like an inclusion will also mean exclusion. So that's something that's been on my mind a lot recently.
Yeah, thanks, Brooks. Yeah, I wanted to, just kind of talk about I'm very skeptical of anything that sounds like a kind of, if you're familiar with the integral map, anything that sounds like a sort of decentralized green structure. just my experience of those kind of radically inclusive or decentralized organizations, you end up with a subterranean hierarchy rather than a conscious hierarchy. And what ends up happening is you get kind of these weird kind of passive aggressive, weird kind of denied dynamics. And that's something that I can own that I probably have more of a trigger around that than, like, I've rarely seen it work. So like, and we really want, but I also recognize that there is a place beyond the kind of strict kind of orange hierarchy space that we're kind of reaching towards. But it's a very, whatever that space is, a very fragile construct. And as Brooks said with the Borderland, even when you've got a kind of good map, like the Reinventing Organizations book, which kind of lays it out, it works in theory, it's very difficult to actually make it work in practice. And there also is, as Brooks raised at the end, there is the question of exclusion and inclusion that comes in. And my experience is that you have to have that dynamic arrives at times anyway, and you need to kind of deal with that as it comes up. But I think we talked about the framing of the call beforehand, and I think we'll talk about that towards the end of the call. What I think we'd like to do now is to really talk about, like, what are the positive values? What are the kinds of the rules of, the values that we want to see in the community, that we all want to embody, and we want to have reciprocated from others in the community. So I'm thinking that could be the first inquiry of just a really open sharing of around 3 minutes each. We'll probably go into groups of 4, and then just to share around what our hopes are, and maybe experiences of communities. Maybe we go a bit longer, because I think it'd be nice to give space for communities where that has worked and communities where that hasn't worked. What do you think, Ali and Brooks? Does that sound about right? Just give a really open space for people to talk about whatever.
Yeah, I think longer is a bit better, because I think, like you said, there's a few different elements. There's how do I want to be in community? What do I see my responsibility? What's the kind of community that I'd love to be in? And what is my reflection on communities I've been part of, and what's worked and what hasn't? So there's actually quite a lot in it. So maybe a little bit more time could be good.
Okay. So let's maybe go slightly, so we go 4 minutes or 5 minutes?
Let's go 5. Let's go hardcore.
Okay, let's go 5.
5 flies by.
And so we'll aim for groups of 3. Yep, great, so trios. And for those who are new to this, what we really encourage is to, as we've talked about circling, we've talked about inquiry on the channel, just to really try and be curious about what you think about this topic, and really follow that thread of curiosity. And hopefully you'll learn something as you're speaking, as the other people in your group will at the same time. So everyone is now back. So I think we will go to raising hands. What we'd like to do now is just kind of gather whatever wisdom and whatever was shared in the breakouts for maybe 10 minutes or so, just to get a sense of what emerged from those conversations. And Martina, you were first with your hand up, so you need to unmute yourself, Martina.
David, do you mean the participants?
Yeah.
Or do you mean the physical hand up?
No, if you go to the participant tab, then you'll be able to see how to raise your hand in there.
Thank you.
Yeah. So just to say, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think what I felt very passionate about was living on this island, and at the moment I'm on a road trip in my camper van in the west of Ireland, where the weather's very rainy and it's very connected with nature. And what I want for my community, which is in Dublin, but also with my family, is the same that I want from the community of Rebel Wisdom. Is is really to connect at all these levels. Earlier today, I had a crew kind of a tribal lands meeting with the Verveki group, and we talked about the ways of knowing, and it was just really a profound experience to listen. And struggling here with the noise, I'm parked literally living on the street in a sacred site in the west of Ireland. But my granddaughter, my one and only granddaughter, 8 years old, is Mexican Irish. And I really want to speak for the people who live on this island now in the 21st century, not for Irish Americans or the Irish diaspora, but for the people, the 5 million people who live here in this country on this island right now. And I think this is the community, the people, and people are so respectful when we drive on the streets, when we, in Dublin where I live, and just to live in that life and have that community, although we don't engage in conversation as with Rebel Wisdom, but people are very respectful driving and so on. So it's good.
Great, thank you, Martina. I think Bruce
Contributor.
Parker. Bruce Parker, I think you were
Hello.
next.
Okay, thank you. Hi there. We spoke about the value curiosity mostly as an underpinning value that you've already mentioned in these conversations. And someone pointed out that John Vervaeke had replaced the word or suggested wonder as another word, another value which has a slightly different flavor to curiosity, perhaps more celebrating what's being said rather than just wanting to know what it is. We made the point that when the spirit of curiosity is not in the conversation, either coming from the whole group or particular people, then what to do about it? How do you say you're not being curious anymore? You're trying to push a point of view, and how to keep that how to keep a connection between you and not make the principle of curiosity something you beat people over the head with when they're not doing it. And then the observation that the difference between, say, Joe Rogan and Piers Morgan and the way they do their shows online and on breakfast TV is that the Piers Morgan method uses 90-second kind of spaces for the person to make their point, whereas Joe Rogan uses 90 minutes. And so curiosity takes space and time. You cannot do curious conversations in panicky amounts of time.
Great, thank you, Bruce. Really, really good points. Clay. Clay, if you're speaking.
There we go. I got it. Hi, everyone. Let's see. I'm going to say some words here about, first of all, I think it's the way that you be, David, and the way that you be, Ali, that has us all show up the way that we do. You've attracted like-minded. So that's a great place to start. Now, I think what I'm getting is that we want to come together under at least a shared intention of some kind. Ali, you said these great words: nuanced, open, safe, challenging, dynamic, and I'll add edgy. I think those are good words to put in an intention. In our discussion, we were delighted, Danny and Joe and I, at the idea of a community that wanders together, that is curious, that we kind of like learn to deal with our hijacks together. We don't step over things. We have compassion for, the ones that are here, the ones that are included, which would be everyone if we're going to do radical inclusion. And as I would probably always say, so as a community, we're not just saying things, we're also listening for something, like something to emerge that we can build off of. And in the building, we would be listening again for something to emerge. like a vine as opposed to a bonsai. That's for you, Joe. And so if either of my partners want to add something to that, I didn't embody everything, but those are the words that I had to say. Thank you for your listening.
Thanks, Clay. So unless one of the partners wants to speak, we're going to go to Kieran McKinney. Oh, no, Kieran.
Close enough, close enough.
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo one thing that one of our people said, Mike. He said, we want to be able to offer feedback. And I like the idea that feedback will be offered as if it's a gift. And it's the whole notion of, there's a certain amount of, when you pay into a poker game, there's a certain amount that you have to be able to play the game. So we're discussing this idea of, well, we want these things to be able to offer feedback. We want people to be humble enough to take it and work with it. And that does require exclusion. And this isn't an answer, unfortunately, but we didn't know how you actually, not enforce is the wrong word and police is the wrong word, but how do you actually action the filter to permit only those who are in a position where they get the idea of offering feedback as a really good thing.
These are the central questions. Thank you, Kieran. Apologies for mispronouncing your name. John Whitman.
Hi, everybody. We basically, all of us in our different ways, spoke about, not really at all about what we might be into. So although in the background it was clearly the likes of curiosity, and that was a question left in the air. It was more, I was saying my own experience and my own attraction to Rebel Wisdom, of course, has been what Rebel Wisdom appears to be in business to speak about and to understand better and all the rest of it. But the real attraction was the way that I saw people behaving towards one another, right from the off, whether it was in an interview or a group, in groups of 2 or 3. And then later on, I began to realize more and more how valuable the likes of circling and inquiry. In other words, just basic behavior that makes it actually come alive, that you have real interaction. And I realized that although we could all, broadly speaking, say that we're adults or something like that, this needs practice. I feel in the community, and so there are people who we can use who have more experience of this than others, and so we can get help there. But as I say, I found it very, very valuable. Brief, but not extensive, but a brief involvement with circling and inquiry. Brought out things because of a recognition of the communication and the contact and the mutual humanity in there and access to one another. It came up with actual things that people began to talk about, and then we were there and able to have that conversation. So I think that was one of the biggest things. So, for example, Kai, who has a lot of experience of the American Burning Man, spoke a lot about the difficulties, which were all essentially to do with, or largely to do with the way that people behave towards one another.
Thanks, John. Andrew Seeley.
Yes, hello everyone. Super excited to be here, and I think it's a absolutely incredible community that you've created here, David. One of the things that I was most attracted to with the Rebel Wisdom community is how these inclusive conversations are so robust, and they also bring forth a deeper integration into how we actually integrate the information into our daily lives. So much of kind of like my background in community building. I'm a yoga teacher. I teach internationally, and I also do wellness consulting for, Four Seasons Beverly Hills and the Bel Air Hotel and all these different places. And it's given me the opportunity to really see how people nowadays really want community, and they want communities that are based on kind of like what I would call like concentric circles, in the sense that like the more integrated that we get, the more dialed in that we get, and making ideas accessible for everyone, while at the same time allowing us all to express our own unique talents and luster. And so I really enjoy, the inspiring self-sufficiency of the community, but also the creative uniqueness that you bring in, like really allowing us all to have these diverse conversations that do touch on many different topics, but are also what I would say, it's like universal wisdom. It's all things that can be applied into what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. But I kind of had like a question, because this has been kind of like on my mind, and like witnessing like these really incredible conversations with, Daniel Smotchenberger and all these different awesome human beings, is like with this information, like I really, how do we make it more accessible to the masses? I mean, like this is awesome, that we have like 60 people on this call right now. But now how do we take this and like package it up so that it's something where we can spread it worldwide? And I'm sure that this is something that we can talk about at another time, but I just wanted to present that question towards you, because, I feel like right now more than ever, it's really needed. And, I'm doing my best with the whole wellness approach, getting people into yoga, healthy eating, these simple approaches towards having a clear mind. And I think that that's basically like one of the first steps, but now having these deep conversations where we can actually allow people to share their views and their perspectives, while at the same time applying like actual strategic systems to be able to bring forth a result that is positive. So just throwing it out there.
Thanks, Andrew. Awesome. So I think we're not going to have time to go to everyone who's got their hands raised, just because we've got so many raised at the moment, and we want to kind of potentially move on to another stage of the call. So I'm going to, I think we'll go for two more. But if you're not James Morrison or Ron W, and you've got your hand raised, if you can summarize what you were going to ask and put it into the chat, that would be fantastic, so we don't lose whatever's on the tip of your tongue right now. James Morrison, do you like to share?
Everybody in our trio was relatively new. There was some discussion regarding how exclusion could be managed in terms of decision making. There was a sense that people were coming for sense making and valued a place to discuss without polarization, and that was what some people were coming for. And I expressed some a feeling of maybe some noise in the community, and it being hard to discern everything that's kind of going on in Circle. There seems to be a lot going on, and it's kind of a different experience to maybe how Rebel Wisdom was a few months ago, and but valuable too.
Thanks, James. Ron.
Yeah, hey all. Yeah, I just want to echo others. Very thrilled that you've gone in the direction of building this community and having this circle, so very much appreciated. Just two quick things. One, at a very meta level, as we're all looking at this and you guys are looking at it, I wanted to really strongly +1 what you said, David, about not falling into the trap of, and I hate using all this lingo, but the green structure or the decentralized structure. My experience is that kind of creeping, unhealthy egalitarianism, again, wrong word, can really be the thing that undermines organizations looking to develop into a new place. So I feel it's so important to keep in somewhere that the buck stops. And I know I'm overstating this in a sense. Obviously, lots of room for community and feedback and channels open and concentric circles and all that. But I think I just find that so important these days, that the new emerging kind of organization can't fall into that trap. And I think you guys know what I'm alluding to. And the second thing, just real quick, that came up in our group, I thought was a really nice distinction, is the idea that we want this to be an unsafe space where it can be kind of dangerous and risky, and a safe space. I think Ali was alluding to that. So it seems like somehow finding that sweet spot of unsafe, quote unquote, and safe could be a key distinction. So thanks again, guys.
And Ethel, did you want to share finally before we go to the next stage? You are muted at the moment, yeah.
Hello, everyone. No, I just wanted to say that, well, this community is, well, I see it as an experiment. So yes, it's obviously strong and fragile at the same time, and we don't know, what's going to happen. So, and this is terrifying and exciting at the same time. But what personally I'm here for is to really see if we can integrate all these practices, all these views, like truly integrate or start integrate them. And obviously, as many have said, practice is very important. So practice, and also connecting with other people, like to know who we have, who we're talking to. For example, our group, we just went off a tangent because there were some new people. So we just wanted to know something about each other, because from that connection I don't know, I think it starts all the rest. So until we haven't established that connection, which is not easy because of the online, medium and everything, but I think that's a good place to start. So the practices are fantastic, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. There's some really great contributions in the chat here. Jared, you're making notes, I think, at the moment, are you? We can give you the chat logs afterwards if you wanted to add that to you don't have to transcribe them all from now if you don't want to.
Great, perfect.
Easier. So yeah, I wanted to really, I love that all of the topics that, so Ali, Brooks and I have been having these conversations quite intensively over the last few days. And I think just about all of the key points and key elements that we've been reflecting on have come up very naturally in the sharing so far. Especially the core value of curiosity and how difficult that is to kind of, I mean, you can tell when it's there, but it's a very difficult value to build kind of rules and regulations around. It's like you weren't being curious, and recognizing that there are times when we're all not curious, when we all get into kind of maybe a little bit of reactivity or a little bit of strident kind of argumentation. And so there has to be like a process. I do think that there's something about openness that is a core requirement, I think. And there's also something that came up before, was when I was talking to Brett Weinstein about the nature of the kind of really difficult, nuanced conversations, is that they are actually they have very specific requirements, and they are quite fragile. It is quite fragile to have the environment where people do feel, and the paradox of a lot of the people like Brett are talking about topics that are very difficult to talk about, but at the same time, and they're also quite skeptical of a lot of the extreme kind of, the extremes of the, say, postmodern left, but also know that you do actually require safe spaces. That you actually have to create a space where people feel free to express themselves, and that a certain level of trust and implicit and explicit rules are necessary for that. And I feel like we're growing these like even this conversation now is growing. Like I feel that the nature of the community and the nature of the field around these kind of calls has been growing and deepening for quite a while, and especially over the last few months, to the point where I feel that we're able to handle more potential kind of disruption or more difficult conversations. But it's also that there is a fragility still, I think, before those are made explicit. And I also really love the idea of offering feedback and accepting feedback as being a potentially core value as well. And I think that's a really, and then making space for more edginess. Like, I feel that's something I'm drawn to with the content as well. Like, I feel like I want to start shaking things up a little bit more with the content. So I think having those kind of conversations, and maybe having some spaces that are more explicitly built around that. I know Peter Lindbergh once had something called Intellectual Fight Club, that was, so you know that there may be different spaces with different rules or different kind of rules of engagement. Those are a few things that have come up to me just listening to the sharing so far. Brooks or Ali, did you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I have a few thoughts, and I've been taking some notes. It's been really amazing to hear everyone sharing, and like David just mentioned, also feeling an alignment and feeling a connection as everyone's sharing things that I thought of myself and kind of considered and wrestled with, etc. And there's just a few, I've been taking notes as we've been doing it, and there's a few that kind of let's say some themes that really came up, which I wanted to just name. So obviously we've talked about curiosity. Another one that I think is implicit in what we're all sharing is civility. So just the general way we treat each other. And then one that Zach had just written in the chat was one I had bolded in the little Gmail chat that I'm not, the Gmail box that I'm using, which is humility. Because I think humility is really essential. If we can stay, curiosity and humility are actually kind of closely linked, for me at least. Like, if we can stay in a space of humility, we have a kind of flexibility that we don't have if we have a rigidity and an arrogance or a kind of puffed upness the way we're interacting. And I think somebody asked in the chat, let me see who it was, Conrad, what happens if we're having a bad day? It just kind of speaks to something David was just talking about. We're all going to have bad days. And certainly for me, an idea of community where people are sort of, it's like, like they're living in Stasi Germany, like East Berlin, like kind of looking over your shoulder of like, oh, am I being this enough? Am I being that enough? It's a surefire way to kill a community, I think. So that flexibility that comes with humility, I think, is very anti-fragile and really essential. So that came up for me really strongly as everyone was sharing. And then humanity as well. There's something sort of intangible about all of this, I think, which is just how there's something about how we show up and what kind of intention we have. And I think that for me, very often, even if I'm showing up in a really poor way or I'm noticing other people are in my life, if I know that deep down there's a certain intention, and there's a certain intention to be, at least somewhat open, or an intention to be somewhat self-reflective, that goes a huge way. Even if it's really tiny in that moment, it just goes an enormous way. And when I feel it's not there at all, or it's impossible for that person to feel that, then I have a very different feeling. I notice a kind of closing up in my body and a kind of a reaction. So, and then the other things that came up, I think, really strongly, something Andrew brought up as well, was how do we bring this, everything we're doing here, and this is effectively, in essence, a community of practice, how do we bring this outwards to the world? So Andrew was talking about how do we bring it to, like, I suppose the mainstream in some way, but also a lot of other people have been talking about how do we integrate it into our lives in a practical way. And so I'm not sure that's so much a community value, it's just something I'm really interested to hear coming up in different ways over and over. And that it's obviously something that we have built Rebel Wisdom around from the beginning is how do you apply these ideas? How do you live this out in our lives? And so I'm very touched and encouraged that it's coming out right now as we're sharing. And and then the edginess as well. I really like that. Always got to have the edge. So, and that balance of safety edge. And I think a few people have asked, just the last point I want to make is, you know, safe, I can't remember who it was, but safe space, you know, safe to do what, or safe from what, rather, someone asks. And for me, it's more safe enough in order to do what, which is a terrible sentence, but I hope you get what I mean. So like, it's not about safety from something, like, oh, we need to defend ourselves from something, because I think we are all adults and we are all grown up enough to be able to navigate the interactions we have. It's more that, as we've talked about in the channel a lot, we need a certain level of psychological safety in order to go to the places that we want to go in this community and with Rebel Wisdom as a whole. It's just not possible to have those edgy conversations without some sense of psychological safety. It doesn't really work. You know, like it's even, you know, it's difficult to have a sense of vulnerability even if someone's criticizing you. You know, it's like you have to have, you can be receiving reflection, but it's all about the how for me. It's all about how it's done. So again, the ethos of what we're trying to create is really the how. So that's where I'll leave it. And I want to hand over to Brooks to hear any reflections you have, Brooks.
Yeah, I really enjoy a lot of what I've been hearing. The entry of humanity and safety really sparked something in me. That's like, so one of the core values that we set out from the beginning of Rebel Wisdom is truth, right? And then the question came up, what about when you have a bad day? And I think that the way that those things fit into that is where you go, I'm having a bad day, please be nice to me. That the way that you're finding yourself today and the emotional reaction that you might be having to what's unfolding, even if it's like an emotion against someone, you should be safe enough to be able to bring that in, and not have it dismissed just because it's a pesky emotion, rather than like a brilliantly formulated package of complex thoughts. So I really like that. And then I also just want to echo that, like what I heard some people say about like the risk of flatland, the kumbaya circle where we're all equal and sitting around and like trying and probably failing to reach a consensus. Consensus building sucks, basically. And so I think that like the place where the in Integral where orange and green meet, where the reason and modernity reaches post-modernity and becomes integral, is where like all perspectives need to be heard, but all perspectives aren't equal. There's usually someone who holds a perspective that's going to be the perspective that we go with, even if there are disagreements in it. So yeah, and that is to me not an abstraction. It's absolutely practical, in the sense that that if, for example, I'm a fireman and there's a fire, you might be the boss of the building, but I'm still the one who's calling the shots because I know how to deal with a fire. So yeah, that was. I'm also really enjoying reading through the chat today. Just want to have that.
Yeah, some great contributions. So Brooks and Ali, we were wondering whether we were going to go to another breakout, or do we stay in this? I mean, it feels like there's a really great group field going on, to be honest. So I'm maybe feeling less like going to breakouts unless there's
and there's still hands up as well. So I think maybe to stay here.
Yeah. So if you have your hand up at the moment and you feel that the conversation has gone away from where you wanted to share, then I invite you to put your hand down. But if you want to keep it up or put it up now, then that's cool. I was going to make space for Adriana to share. Because we've been talking quite a bit to Adriana about these topics in the last few days.
Yes, thank you, David. I think that yeah, I really enjoyed this space. I'm much more in a place of inquiry around this, because I do feel a little bit of a conundrum in the way I perceive, you know, this whole boundaries, and hearing Brooks talking, and Ali, and I think it's you know, the thing that comes for me is I'm wary of developmental hierarchy. So it's being spoken about, but the capacity to self-reflect is a developmental one. So that's okay. We're just making it clear that, you know, and I think it's totally fine. I don't think it's not fine, but it's just that arises for me. It's so this is not actually a microcosm of society, and that's fine too. And we're gonna miss some stuff. We're gonna have blind spots, and that's okay too. And so, you know, just keeping it open, because I think when we do have these developmental differences, it can be trickier because we don't have the capacity to self-reflect, and then people take criticism in a harder way, and it makes it trickier to navigate complicated topics. But at the same time, it shows me what I'm missing. And if I can't speak to that person, why is that? So, but then I don't have any answer. I just go like, oh, okay, that's what's happening. So we're gonna be in a place that we can talk and we can criticize each other from a place of self-reflection, which feels really beautiful and kind of cozy and safe, which is nice for generative conversations. But then I'm just mindful of missing, like, what are we missing? What are the bits that are not here? And how can I even hear them? That feels important for me in some way. So, so I'm in between, you know, I'm just toying with both.
Yeah, and I think you speak to a really important question, which is, like, I would hate, I think all of these values are really important, but I would hate to lose the sense of the contrary opinions and the challenge. And that's something that concerns me quite a lot about, like, I feel, for example, there's a gap in the ecosystem for healthy challenge because the YouTube comments are just an absolute dumpster fire always. So you don't get like any good quality critique in there. But then we're kind of discussing most of the questions and most of the topics of the films within a community of people who are obviously kind of mostly on board because they joined up as members. So what is the kind of public facing place for people who are critical of some of the stuff that we're doing, where we can engage in those conversations? Like that, I feel personally is a real, there's an absence there, and I don't quite know how to go about that. Whether making sort of part of circle kind of open to all, and then holding that balance of like good faith critique, because that's something that I personally worry about not being exposed to. So yeah, I think you raise a lot of good points. Sally, you have your hand up.
Yeah, hi. I put what I was going to say in the chat, but can I just respond to what you've just said,
Sure.
David?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just feel, and I think it was Andrew earlier on about accessibility and this stuff being available to people who are not on board with it. Yeah, how can we do that? I feel when I engage with Rebel Wisdom and I engage with Circle, there's something in it that feels a bit airless to me, you know, like yeah, it's all a bit homogenous. And how do we get people who might just be tempted to sort of, you know, we can get them across the bridge? That sounds a bit culty, and I don't mean that, but I mean, you know, like kids and young people.
Reference, wasn't it, Sally?
Sorry?
That Scientology reference.
Was it? Well, I didn't mean it to be. But I'm just aware that could sound a bit, but yeah, because change happens, I believe, from the edges of organizations, you know, the energy is at the peripheries. If that's true, if that's where change comes from, then how do we merge with the edges? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it's certainly true. That's where novelty comes from. Novelty comes from the edges, not from the centers. For sure. I feel like when I said if the conversation had gone in a different direction, you could put your hands out. Almost everyone did. So there's now no hands raised. I feel like
I'm sure there's more energy in hand raising. Like, yeah, if anyone has anything that's just come up, raise your hand. Just to speak briefly to what Sally just shared and what you were sharing before, David. I wonder if there's a way that there's a okay. So I wonder if there's a way to import criticism into the community that the community as a whole uses as fuel. You know, so getting the criticism from somewhere, like in our Discord channel, we had which was public, or is rather, it's still there. I'd actually be curious to see in the chat anyone who was on that Discord or still is using that Discord, just out of curiosity, because it was quite active, or maybe is. We had a criticism for Rebel Wisdom tab, and it had a different kind of feel to it because it was public. But I wonder if there is a way for us to, well, just go to the YouTube comments, I guess. We could troll them and then figure out, okay, the difficulty is finding one that's nuanced enough and deep enough that's like really kind of, yeah, okay, we can wrestle with this and then kind of chew it over, and we can all kind of look at it in that way. I'm wondering how that might work. But yeah, that's an open question. I'll leave hanging.
Christine Jenkins, you have your hand raised.
Oh yeah, just following on from that, because that's one of the things that really attracted me to come, is the learning to have those conversations with other people. And I'm just as you're talking, I'm just thinking, I wonder if there would be any way of having, I've got friends I'd love to have these conversations with, of maybe inviting people in to a space where there is an opportunity to have those open conversations of people who aren't necessarily here yet, but would be open to, and maybe having a party or something, you know, some way of inviting people in, though, with an openness to knowing that they would be heard and listened to and talked to. I'm just exploring that now as I'm saying it, really. But so that is the thing, you know, so for spreading things, I think there's like a ripple. So learning to have those conversations means, you know, if I then talk to other people, then that spreads out. It doesn't all have to come in, it spreads out too, and that's the circling and the rippling. So that's just that.
Thank you, Christine. Jared, a wonderful note taker.
Hi, can you guys hear me? Is my computer's kind of slow right now. Am I all good? Great. Yeah, just a note on the party, if you will, that Christine just mentioned. I know Future Thinkers does a social hour they just started doing. So I think there could be something fun for you guys to explore, like a social hour. You invite people and follow basic rules that we come up with after this. So I thought that was kind of cool. And then I wanted to cover on just a couple quick things that I didn't hear yet in that we got into our breakout room about. Some kind of imagery. It's as if the conversation is something else. We're creating a baby together. That's kind of some imagery. That we're doing a painting. We all are offering different colors into the paint, into the canvas, and that we are speaking through versus speaking to. So speak when you're spoken through. That was something fun that we kind of covered there. And yeah, and that's just a byproduct of kind of feeling safe and vulnerable in your space that you're speaking. So
yeah, I love that I love that speak when spoken through. It feels like a very emergent quality. If anyone here was on the call last Wednesday, it was the most pure form of that I think I've experienced yet. That was with Guy Sengstock. I'll put the video of it in Circle soon, but it was, yeah, we just had this incredible spaciousness that opened up towards the end that we're trying to reverse engineer. We're trying to work out how it happened, because I don't think it was any one. I think it was a combination of factors of what was shared that really created it. But that was like that. What's coming out for me is this sense of that there need to be different spaces for different things as well. Like that was very much an emergent conversation of real spaciousness and vulnerability and honesty. And then there's the sense of, no, we want somewhere where we can actually have like quite punchy conversations and there to be enough spaciousness for us to kind of really go into it. Like I'm getting a sense of what the different spaces might be going forward. And something I'd like to land right now is we've got such a wealth of experience in the community. Those of you on the call who feel they have experience, they might want to kind of help host or to take ownership of creating some of those spaces, to really, yeah, to maybe suggest that, send us a note after this to members at Rebel Wisdom goes to all of us. So yeah, if there's something that you feel called to do in terms of a space that's been suggested, or yeah, a process that you'd like to lead, then that's really what we're looking for. And I think, yeah, speaking when spoken through. Anyone else wanted to, before we go to the next hand? Ali or Brooks, did you have any thoughts? No?
Actually, yes. Just the thing that comes up with the party has been on my mind a lot for the last few weeks, and there is this option of like starting a specific like subsection of Circle where getting a membership could be as easy as just signing up, and that could be like the foyer or the atrium or whatever you could call it. And I think that could be a very interesting way to gather outside perspectives as well. Though my prediction would be that it would need some moderation. So if just to plus the invitation that David just put in, if you feel called to moderate such a space, then I would love to talk to you also. Of course, we need to discuss the specifics of how such a thing might work. But yeah, there it is.
Thanks, Brooks. Owen.
It's just to kind of your point on good faith critique. I'm just wondering, would it be useful to have some form of a formal de-escalation process? So it would mean that you have the capacity to speak freely without constantly trying to check what you're saying, knowing that at the very end of any discussion, no matter how polarized or how heated it may get, that everybody knows there is a process for reconciliation at the very end of it.
That's a really good idea. I've seen that in various workshops where there's, especially if contained in it is an opportunity to own whatever emotions are coming up or whatever projections are coming up as your own, like, because ultimately whenever there's a heated interaction, like what the process needs to kind of re-own. It's like, okay, who did that person become in that moment, or what were you projecting onto that person? Or yeah, I think that would need some consultation, but I have seen ones that work with that actually, and it has to be done in a really kind of non-sucky way, because I can be a little bit too too much sometimes as well. If it gets too formalized as well, it can be too, but I think it's a really good suggestion, Owen. Thank you.
Like just what comes to mind is in essence, I know from in terms of like say relationships and things like that, it's not so much about how well you can do the good days, but how well you can get through the bad ones. And I think one of the elements that tends to allow people to do that is an element of trust and knowing that you're both trying to get to the same kind of positive outcome. So just having that process of knowing that you're both in it for the good, and just some way of kind of working through that just could help.
Yeah, and I think that also speaks to something that has come up recently. I mean, we've had a couple of interactions recently where you have to have a certain, what has become clear as well is you can only really do a process if someone has an investment in getting through it. And there has to be an investment in either being part of this, being part of these conversations in an ongoing way, or that you see something of value in the process that you're going through. Otherwise it doesn't work. Like there has to be a certain sense of investment. And obviously we have an automatic investment in Rebel Wisdom because yeah, we've created this space. And I think a lot of other people, like the familiar faces I'm seeing here have got that similar level of investment who've been on these calls before. And that's not always there with people who've just arrived. And often it's difficult to have a process where there's not necessarily a level of investment into going through it. And that's something that's come up in the processes we've experienced recently as well.
Just wanted to, before I forget, just on Owen's point, to just invite anyone who feels interested in that to maybe put in the psychotechnologies area and circle what they've seen work really well in that regard. And I'm thinking of like imago therapy, kind of couple counseling. There's lots of different techniques that we've all probably have a collective wisdom that we've experienced, you know, whether it's simple as talking from the eye, or whether it's asking someone if they're ready for reflection, or if it's, you know, I've done some interesting decentering exercises before, just journaling that I wonder if they could apply. I'm sure there's like dozens more. I would love to see that, because also it goes beyond just what we're doing here as a community. It also goes into what we're kind of, you know, continuously exploring on the channel, which is how do we get different tribes to communicate with each other. So these techniques that we develop between us could well then be used, which speaks to that, or be used outside of this community, which speaks to something that's come up a few times. How do we take these ideas and bring them out? So yeah, maybe I'll just right now put a thing in the psychotechnology area, and people can add in any great de-escalation or kind of clearing exercises that they think might work. It'd be really interesting to see.
So we're just going to go take the last three contributions. So if you don't have your hand up now, please don't raise it, because we won't have time to come to your, but if anything comes up, do share it in the chat. So Josh, Uri.
Hey, so when you were talking about ideas for ways of getting engaging with constructive feedback or criticism, one thing that came to mind is so I've been engaging with the Stoa a decent amount recently. One of the recent releases was this conversation around transcending cancel culture critique, because there was the whole cancel God concept, and you know, I think most of us are, you know, we see the problems with it, but it was a really good nuanced sort of conversation around, really from an integral perspective, how can we actually look to see what's of value in that. And just one thing with the way the Stoa is working, it seems more kind of distributed, because there's a lot of different facilitators with different topics and sort of feel to the different topics. They attract different types of folks. And I think Rebel Wisdom wants to go in that direction. I think there's value in that, because it brings in different perspectives, people that are engaged enough to, you know, not just be starting from scratch if they're going to critique anything, but may have different perspectives that are valuable to integrate. So I think that's a good direction to go.
Yeah, for sure. Jochen.
Yeah, for me, one of the things that came up again and again is the idea of holding space for conflict and for really difficult conversations. And I was wondering if next to the Sensemaking 101, you may at some point offer something like Space Holding 101, where there's literally like a course that provides some guidance as to like how to actually provide the space maybe for other people, so that I can even go to like 10 of my friends and say, hey, we recently quibbled about this and this topic. How about we have a Zoom call, or how about we meet in a park and have a difficult conversation? Then to actually know how to really kind of sense maybe in my own body, okay, now I feel like tension is rising, and how to tell people that in a way that they actually respond to it. And really this more procedural aspect of how to hold the space and to minimally provide this as a kind of, well, if not an actual online course with 8 sessions or something, then maybe as like a short 12-page write-up, or some sort of like practical how to hold space. I'd find that really helpful.
I'd love to see a show of hands if we else would find that helpful. Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, that's actually something we've been looking into really recently, and may well be coming as a mini course, which we won't say more about now, but yeah.
But we're really thinking the direction that we want to go is upskilling, or providing opportunities for upskilling, and that's one of the ways, is because I think there's a lot of people who would love to take more of a facilitation role, but maybe don't feel they have the experience, or don't feel that they yet have the skills to do that. So that's really something that we're thinking very hard about how to provide opportunities to learn that. So thank you. And Michael Jasny, you are probably muted if you're speaking. If you're not speaking, then that's why we can't hear you.
Apologies, sorry, I was muted. No, it's just a quick point to reiterate the facilitation piece. Look, I think, we're talking about our self-development and being able to recognize, rises in emotions, our triggers, etc. But I think in the early days, and if somebody's having a bad day, that facilitation piece is crucial. And I just wanted to add the point that perhaps it's more about ask somebody. Now, that doesn't have to be a formal facilitator. It could be something somebody within the group. I noticed Clay said self-appointed. And I think in terms of, coming together, acting collectively, I think somebody recognizing that perhaps a conversation is getting out of control, and just asking the question, hey, is something else going on here, or is there something else behind you? Again, all best intentions, we can be skilled, but we might lose control. So just having that third party step in and just ask the question, that would be my suggestion for the facilitation piece.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so just want to say thanks to everyone for some really wonderful contributions. And we, as with all of these conversations, this is the beginning of the conversation rather than the end of it. And so thank you again to Jared for taking the notes of this as well. We'll forward on the chat so that we can make sure we get all of that in. And I think we've got a good sense of what's been shared and what the values are that we want to kind of build into any structure. I feel like it will always be a certain conditional structure. I think there are certain values that we want to see here that are going to be held informally as much as explicitly, but I think we will make explicit as much of it as we can, so that we know, especially we know for people who are coming in new to the conversation, what kind of community this is, what the values are of everyone in it. And yeah, I think everyone has demonstrated those values really beautifully on this call. So thank you for another really deep experience, really deep sharing, and look forward to seeing you next week or later this week or on Circle in like 20 minutes, who knows?
Yeah, I just also wanted to say a huge thank you. Feel like we really let something emerge between us, actually, and we'll go off and gather these and keep the conversation going on Circle. I just wanted to mention the event we have, the members only event on the 27th of September, Sunday the 27th of September, which is just for members. David and I were just chatting of whether that might be an opportunity to kind of bring a friend. So we'll keep talking about that and see if that works for that event, but it may well be members with a +1, which could be fun. And we're going to be posting a bit more information on that soon, but it's going to be, yeah, really looking forward to that. If anyone was at our one-day events during the worst of COVID, sort of in March and April, it'll be a similar structure, but I think it'll go deeper because so many of us know each other now. So I'm looking forward to that. And Brooks, I'm not sure if you wanted to add anything to close.
I wish I could, but I'm fading fast. I just want to appreciate all your inputs. This was I feel humbled by what I've seen today.
Awesome. So as is traditional, we can all unmute ourselves and say thank you and goodbye. See everyone soon.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Have a great week.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.